Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
My name's Matt.
No, it's not.
What's your name?
Josh. Fine, it is.
I like clients.
I like clients too. I'll go with that.
All right.
I don't like to write them.
If
I
you
like
had
it.
to build a client, what would you want to build it in?
I'd ask you. I wouldn't do it myself. I'm not.
Yeah?
I wouldn't do it in that. That
No?
wouldn't. I mean, it might be a thing, but. But. Yeah.
Well, so personally, I've taken an affection towards not JSF, but Angular, because it has a real goal of one framework to rule them all.
That's never happened before. I don't know if that's going to be
It's a
successful.
lofty goal, though.
I
It's
don't
kind
know.
of worked for Spring Boot.
I don't know of any other frameworks that have like envisioned to take on the whole world. I don't know what you're talking
Right.
about.
Well, you know,
It's not a thing.
now we're doing it.
Okay.
And it's not even we. Like, I'm not even part of the
What is
project.
this? What is this wee wee
I
stuff?
don't know. But
We're in French.
remember 2007? In 2007, Apple released the iPhone with no native apps, only web apps. And they quickly realized that they needed more client-side functionality, right? So they developed the SDK that everyone uses for developing Mac OS apps or, iPhone apps or iOS apps. In 2007, Chrome wasn't even released, and IE7 had just come out.
Oh.
Anyone still using IE7 has to support IE7?
IE7 victims.
Anyone? Oh, we have 1, 2,
Victims.
4 folks. If you would like one of these beers,
Yeah.
maybe
we'll
need it
open
more
source
than we
our
do.
beer.
Right. So now everything's changed, though, because the browser can do so much more. Today, you can run Linux in your browser with JavaScript.
Yeah. So amazing.
Don't believe me? Here we go. Actually boots a Linux kernel.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the part that I always forget. Sorry. Mirror.
So refresh the browser page.
So we can see it boot up.
Yeah. This is created by Fabrice Badard in 2011. It's an x86 machine code emulator.
Look, it's got VI.
Written entirely in JavaScript. Now, he's using VI, which is the wrong way to do it, right? We all know that you should be using Emacs. I apologize for Matt for his offense.
Right, and then you can compile it, right, with tcc-o hello. It's even got a compiler. A small one, tiny one.
Yeah. Tiny C compiler, yeah.
Then you can run it, right?
Yeah.
There we are. Look at that. Browsers are awesome now, right? No more IE7, which is nice.
That's entirely in the browser. It's doing bit shifting, bit twiddling in JavaScript. It's downloading an ISO and running the whole thing in the browser. That's amazing. That's VMware in the browser, basically. Right?
Right. So if you're developing web apps, who does responsive web design? Who does mobile-first web design? Web development. So same guy.
Using Emacs.
Right, using Emacs. But the difference is responsive is what most people do, and with responsive, you're basically taking your 30-inch monitor and saying, okay, I've created the web app, now let's see how it looks on my phone, right? And you make it work on your phone, and that's great, but it's really not that good for mobile. Mobile first is where your testing and development is done on your phone. Or you can use like the device toolbar in Chrome to actually do it that way, so it's a little more real world. And the truth is that we failed on mobile. So this is a talk from Alex Russell. You can go and watch it on YouTube there. But basically, 3 seconds.
Do you remember Alex Russell? Anybody here remember Dojo? The Dojo's JavaScript framework?
Right.
That was another universal
It
framework.
almost conquered the world.
Almost did until it
Right?
didn't.
Until it didn't. Now he works on Chrome.
Yeah.
So he's got a good job. And he deals with a lot of people, building web apps and using Chrome and trying to make things faster. So what they found is 3 seconds for a web page to load on a 3G connection is realistic. Like, that's what we should aim for. But DoubleClick did a report last fall, and found that 53% of visits are abandoned if a mobile site takes more than 3 seconds. The same report said the average mobile site loads in, guess. Give me a guess. Average.
30 seconds.
20. That's really close. 19. So you sit there and just wait.
Oh, my brain.
And wait. But then you're done because it's like 3 seconds. You're like, okay, next.
I've already started opening up a new tab.
Right.
Reddit's
so
probably already cached.
we failed on mobile.
Yeah.
Because your laptop and your desktops are filthy liars. And the truth is, in a $200 Android device on a 3G connection. That's what most of the world experiences, right? But for us as developers, a lot of times we don't have to deal with that, maybe because our clients aren't the internet like Google's is. Ours is, you know, an enterprise customer or something like that. So we can get away with making it a bit fatter and a bit slower, but you don't have to. You can fight back against, you know, these filthy liars, these fast machines. You can implement the purple pattern.
Menteur.
Yeah?
Liars.
Liars.
Yes.
You can get the $200, you know, unlocked Android. You can use Chrome and its inspect tools. You can use Lighthouse, which is a plugin that I'll show you, to actually verify that you're doing progressive web applications correctly. And you can use DevTools and CPU throttling. Those tools are all in Chrome, and you can like make things, you know, seem slower. So the purple pattern is push critical resources for the initial URL route, render the initial route, pre-cache remaining routes, and lazy load and do everything else on demand. And you can do that with progressive web apps. So this is a summary that I like to show. Basically, you need 3 things. You need it to be on HTTPS. That's no negotiation there. It has to do that. It has to load while offline.
That's the default in HTTP2, yeah?
Right.
Basically.
HTTP2 doesn't work unless it's on HTTPS.
Yeah.
So if you're using HTTP, you're using legacy software. You got to do certs, right? You got to do Let's Encrypt, right? You can do it for free. They remove it every 3 months, so easy to do. And then you have a web app manifest. So the web app manifest shows up differently on different devices. So on a laptop, it'll show up with a little bar at the top of Chrome that says, do you want to install this application? And then you can install it, and it sits with your applications. You can reference it that way. On an Android device, it'll actually show up as a regular application. So it looks just like, you know, any old application on your home screen. On an iPhone, it won't work.
Awkward.
So they're the ones who brought it to us in 2007 that we could develop web apps on these devices. Now they have this SDK that does really well, and so they kind of look at Google and what they're doing with progressive web apps and are like, meh, maybe. So what I'm going to show you is how to actually build a progressive web app that talks to the Good Beer service that Josh did. So let's do it.
Don't let the brain get in the way. Just go for it.
So what I did during the break was I took Josh's service. He checked it into GitHub there in Cloud Native PWAs. And you can see here I opened them all up in IntelliJ. Oh, you can't see. You can't see that I opened it all up in IntelliJ, but now you can. Right? So git clone. Pretty fast network here. So well done,
Yeah.
Devox France.
Bravo, Devox France.
And then, you know, I tried to find it, try to get things working. What we discovered was Josh had a trick that he didn't tell you about with Lombok.
All right.
He had the IntelliJ plugin installed so he could run it right from IntelliJ, and it would do the annotation processing, generate the getters and setters. When I tried that on my version of IntelliJ, it didn't work. So I had to run it from Maven because there's a Maven processor that picked it up and then generated it. So we're glad we did that during the break and didn't fail right away.
Didn't have the beer yet.
Right. So now if, you know, we do this, then we see all the beers, right, with Budweiser taken out. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Angular CLI. The reason for that is because there's this cool project called Angular Mobile Toolkit. So when I first started learning about PWAs about 6 months ago, I found this site and I was like, wow, this is great. They tell you how to build PWAs with Angular. So you're like, cool. Like, nice site. Preview on GitHub.
Is the website itself progressive?
Nope.
Awkward.
Well, let's see. You want to see?
Yeah.
Let's test it out. There's this, right, network, offline. Nope.
Oh, that's awkward.
All right, not even progressive.
That is not good. Does not bode well.
So here's what they say. You can create an installable mobile app with the Angular CLI. You can add that web app manifest, and you do the offline stuff with the service worker. Right? That sounds all great. So you go here, and they're like, here's how you do it. You install Angular CLI, and you create a new one with a -- mobile flag. Cool. So
even I could do that.
ng new. Well, we'll do it at the top so you can see it a bit better. ng new, and what are we going to call it? Client.
Yeah.
And then -- mobile, right?
PWA or something like that. Oh.
Did that work?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. -- mobile is not registered with the new command. Oh, man. Like, it looks so easy, right? There's nothing on here that says it's not going to work. It's just one of those hard way things you find out. So it used to actually block you and, you know, say, hey, mobile's not supported. Now at least it generates app. So what I'm going to show you today is what you need to do to make an Angular app into a progressive web app. There's a few extra steps, but it's possible that someday they will actually support this with a -- mobile flag, and this stuff just gets incorporated into your app easily. So this is the kind of app that Angular CLI generates for you. So it's got, you know, a basic component and then an index.html and a bunch of stuff for TypeScript to do the compilation there. So you can do ng-serve.
So TypeScript, of course, is the language du jour of Angular 2.0 or better. It's a transpiler, right? It compiles into JavaScript.
And it's a lot like ES6. If you're doing TypeScript, you're really doing ES6 with a few small differences. You have to have types, or you don't have to have types. You can use any. So it's not required that you have types, but it can offer some convenience. So that's all it is by default, just app works, right? There's nothing really there. So we need to actually generate this stuff. So the other thing that's cool, it's got like protractor built in, so you can run ng e2e, and it'll actually start up and run protractor tests like in your browser and verify that everything works. So it's a nice little tool, especially because you saw there, like with Hello World and Angular JS, you could basically have 10 lines of code in a single HTML file and it would work. Well, with Angular 2, because of TypeScript and all the compilation stuff, it requires a bit more files to set up. So something like Angular CLI is very useful for getting started because, you know, it generates all that boilerplate for you. So now we can open this up in IntelliJ. And we need to create a beer service, right, to talk to our REST endpoint. So it has the ability to generate stuff, which is nice. So ng generate, and you can type out generate if you want, but you don't have to. So you can just do G. You can type out service if you want, but you don't have to. You can just do S, and then you can do beer.
Beer.
You can't just do B. It has to be like
thing.
Right.
It should know.
So we can just do that, and that generates a beer service for you. One of the things that I don't like is it puts it in the root app directory. A lot of times when it generates the other components, it puts them in their own directory. So what I like to do, especially with services, is create a directory called shared. You know why?
Why?
What do you like to do with beer?
Share it. Oh,
Share
yeah.
it.
There you go.
I'm getting thirsty. Can I?
Yes,
can I
sir.
get one of those?
After you, my friend.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers to you, buddy.
Oh, it's like warm and foamy.
Still beer.
Still beer. So what we have here is our beer service, and we're going to need to talk to the REST endpoint. So just like with Spring Boot and Spring, we have dependency injection in Angular, so you can do private, and we'll call it beer. Or actually, we need HTTP, right?
It's so clean.
And then you need a get all method, right? Get all. And we can return an observable here.
So this is a thing that, this is from RxJS.
Yep.
Asynchronous composition library, right?
Right. Yep.
Very
And
similar
then there's shortcuts that you can use that Angular 2 has for IntelliJ. So that's not one of them because it's not working, but you can do ng HTTP. And then there's these live templates. So the HTTP provider, that first one is one I recorded, but this ng2 one is one that I downloaded. So you could do the same thing, and it generates a lot of that boilerplate code for you, right? And then you can type in just the endpoint URL. So localhost 8081, good beers.
beer.
And then you got to take off that prefix part that it doesn't chop off. And now you're like, cool, that should work, right? This worked great in Angular 2, and it worked great with the previous version of IntelliJ. I'm not sure why something broke, but what I like to do right before a talk, particularly like last night, is upgrade everything, right?
Yeah.
So I was going to do this with Angular 2, and then I was like, come on, Angular 4 came out last week, so let's upgrade. And then IntelliJ, they were like, hey, there's a new version, and you're like, why not?
What
right?
could go wrong?
Yeah.
Push.
So I did that, and it knows something's wrong here. You can tell, right? It's like, hey, I underlined 2 lines, buddy. What are you doing? Right? Something's wrong, right? And so you're like, okay, what is it? You know, can you import that for me? And it's like, I don't know what to do. So with experience, you come up with these other shortcuts that are like ng import map from RxJS, and then boom, does that. And you're like, okay, well, we're getting somewhere. But what? Why? The type parameter argument for the type parameter t cannot be inferred from the usage. Right?
Of course, obvious.
See, client-side development's easy.
I can see the problem.
It's
If you don't know, I'm not
yeah,
going to tell you.
it's this weird thing here where, oh, you just got to import response.
Obviously.
Obviously. So watch for that one. But no, it did used to import it for you. So IntelliJ messed up or Angular messed up. I'm going to blame IntelliJ, right? Because that was the last thing I upgraded, and it used to work.
Yeah.
So now we have this beer service, and we need something to actually show it, right? We need a component. So sp or ng generate component beer component, or we'll just call it beer list.
Beer.
Sorry, I got distracted.
You have to wait for the transpilation to happen.
Oh, right. Wait till it compiles.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have this beer list, and we can say, okay, well, let's make that an H2 and a beer list. And then we can use, if you're familiar with Angular 1, it was ng repeat. With this one, you use this fun syntax, it's ng4. Why is there the star there? It's interesting. It's using the template feature of HTML5, and it basically lets you have this thing and transforms it to a template around this thing, and then it does it for you. So that's a simple explanation. And then you do let beer of beers, right? Something like that.
Anybody here remember tapestry? Tapestry?
Few people.
It worked. It was kind of like that for the server side. Just wondering.
So now we can list the beer name, right? But now we need to actually talk to that service. So in here we can do private beer service. And then we'll go into the ng on init, and we'll actually write this beer service, right? Get it all, and then subscribe to it. This is, one of the features of doing, reactive development is you can subscribe instead of having a promise where you call .then, and then you can take this and say, okay, well, take that data, give me an arrow function, and set it to a local variable. So this beers equals data, and then you can have an error function that's like error equals console error, and just say, okay, put the error there, right? And then it says, hey, I don't know where that is, so you got to create it. Beers. Now all that looks pretty good, except it doesn't like semicolons in there, so we're getting somewhere now. Like, okay, let's try it. So all you have to do is save, and ng serve, if it's running in the background, we'll serve it up, but I don't think I have it running, so we'll check it. Not running. Okay, so we'll go back, run it here, ng serve. Think it's going to work?
I haven't seen any obvious reason why it won't, but of course I'm always wrong about this kind of thing, so no.
Who thinks it's going to work? I like your attitude. Unfortunately. So we load it up, and look, close enough, right? It works, but it's not listing anything. So we need to go into here and say, well, not that one. We need to go into the client and actually put it into the app component, right? So we have this app beer list, and it's right here, right? It's been generated, and it's been given this name when we generate it. So I don't really like the app prefix, so I take it off. But when I do that, there's now IntelliJ and Angular CLI warns me, like, hey, you should have a prefix on there. So they're trying to prevent name collisions with other components, right? So that, just refers to that beer list, so it should show it. And we go back here, and we're like, ooh, stack trace. No provider for beer service. So you're going to see this a lot, and then I'm going to show you how to fix it. So you can actually do it on the element itself or on the component. So in this beer list component, you can add a providers and do it right here. But the better place to do it, I think, is in the app module, because then it's available to all components, not just, the particular one we're using. So you specify it as a provider there. You go back here, and then you're like, yes, it's going to work. And then you're like, no. But
happened?
if you're familiar with this error, this one's a very common one when you're doing Angular development, cross-origin resource sharing. You can't just talk to another server on a different port without configuring that server to allow the client to talk to it. So you're like, okay, figure out which one we're talking to. I think it's the edge service, right? And how do you do cross-origin resource sharing?
Add cross-origin.
It's an annotation. Big surprise there.
Falls right in.
And then because I want to deploy this to production in this demo, I'm going to do just origin star, right? Because if I did localhost 4200, then as soon as I deployed it to production, it wouldn't work, and I go back and be like, oh, okay, I got to change that to whatever my client URL is. So for the purposes of the demo, I'm doing it this way. What I would recommend you do, though, is make it a property, and then you can configure in your application property something like 4200, and then you can do a pipe and do like a variable, right,
yeah.
for something like Cloud Foundry. So on Cloud Foundry, you could say, here's my client URI, and it'll override that variable and allow 4200 and that one. I'm just doing the simple way here.
Property placeholder resolution in Spring.
Right. So now if we restart that, it should allow us to talk to it. And look at that. Right? It's working.
Bravissimo.
We have like a client and a server that talks together, but it's kind of a boring client, right? All it's displaying is text, and when we're doing clients and we're building these resilient UIs, what we want to do is rather than having the server deliver us like a URL and then the client go fetch it, we want the client to actually do the work of figuring out the URL. So let's do something fun like use a Giphy service, right? Giphy is a fun service, so let's look up the names of these beers and see what images come back.
I like how the modules, it's like you're defining beans in a single place and then injecting them elsewhere.
Right?
Very familiar. Anyway.
So you can do, a new directory. We'll call it Giphy.
How many of you spend time on Imager, the website?
No one admits it.
Nobody admits it, but you can lose hours of your life just looking at the randomest of images.
So this is another thing I recommend. You'll notice here at the top of IntelliJ, it says, do you want to compile your TypeScript to JavaScript? Say no. The reason you want to say no is Angular CLI, if you're using it and you're using ngserve, it's doing all that for you. It's putting them in memory or it's putting them in the proper directory. If you allow IntelliJ to create and compile the TypeScript for you, what happens is it generates a bunch of .js files and .map files right next to your .ts files. But it's sneaky about it, and it actually doesn't tell you because it hides them.
Oh.
And then you check it all into GitHub, and you're like, where did all these files come from? Right? So that's why you don't check that. So here we can do a ng Giphy service, live template that I have stored. And so you'll see here that we're just calling the Giphy API with an API key that I found in a tutorial. So this could fail at any point, right, where this API key stops working. So but it's still working today, or it was this morning.
Lesson, don't put your keys in GitHub.
Right, because we'll use them.
Yeah.
And then this one's fun. There's a dancing cat for a 404. So in case we don't get any 404s, I like to show it.
Cats are the best.
Right? He's groovy, man. Okay. So now we got to actually show the image that's returned for these different beers in our component. So we'll go in here and we'll say, well, we have another private Giphy service. And we know our lesson from last time that we should add it here so we don't get that error. And then in here we'll do a for each that loops through all those beers and basically gets the beer name and brings back the first one, right, and sets it as an attribute on that beer object. So now in our HTML we can say image source equals beer.giphy URL. And we'll make the size 200, and we'll give an alt of beer.name. You ready?
I'm scared.
This is like the best part. Not that guy. Not that one.
No.
This one. Oh, that's a 404.
That's a fail. Oh,
There's
there
a
we go.
Leffe guy. There's a Rochefort.
Yes. Reaching for it. Get it?
Digging, right.
Oh, gosh.
Heineken. I like Heineken. Yeah. She's just drinking a keg. Then Duvel. Duvel's nice. You see it's moving there? It's like animated. It's a wrestling match, and then Carmelite is another 404.
Oh, my.
So it all works, but we need to turn this into a progressive web app, right? So to do that, you basically, there's a couple projects from the Angular mobile web toolkit that you can use. One of those is Angular App Shell, and that allows you to basically cache the shell of the application in the browser. And since Angular Material makes things look good, especially on mobile, I'm going to use that as well. So I can go back here and stop this. And then I'll just do it in IntelliJ so it's a little bit easier. So I can move this to the top. You can see it better. And we can do yarn, add Angular Material, and Angular App Shell.
So Yarn is the alternative package manager. You could be using NPM instead.
You could be using NPM, but NPM is like Maven. You know how Maven like downloads the internet? Like NPM downloads the internet and all its friends.
Yeah.
Right? And Yarn is like, it keeps the friends around in like bags or whatever. It's caching, right? So it actually doesn't download the internet and all its friends each time. It actually does a bit of caching, even though it puts all that information in the actual code base. It's still pulling from outside the code base. So it does happen a little faster. The other cool thing I want to show is count lines of code is a cool tool to see how many lines of code are in an Angular project. So this this goes for a while. We'll just let that go in the background.
How much do you think was in the Spring code?
We could do it there too.
Yeah, I just want to see. I'm just curious.
But it's going to get the target directory. Like then I'd have to figure out the command to exclude it. So
never mind.
We could do that as an exercise if we have time. But back to this. We're gonna do a few things to get Angular's Material and App Shell into this project. And the first thing is just adding Material module. This is how you import a lot of functionality from other packages into an Angular app. And then this App Shell module has two features. You can do runtime or pre-render. Pre-render allows you to actually do like universal Angular where you're parsing on the server side. And there is an actual open issue on the universal Angular project for Spring Boot support. So I'm following it, so I think we should like get together and make that happen, right? And then you can actually run Angular on the server side and have it as a static app that serves up the client initially, but then it has a JavaScript there too. So the cool thing is it just happens really fast, right?
Last time we met in your home city, next time you come to mine.
All right. Okay. Sounds good.
Bring the beer.
So now we can go to our app component and make this into an ng material or Angular material. And the biggest difference is we're just changing the HTML, right? And so instead of having H1, we have an MD toolbar, and then we use this progress bar and the shell render and shell no render to actually, do the caching in the browser. And then we can also make our beer list a little prettier.
A little bit.
I mean, the images aren't as big, but it'll still list those Giphy URLs, and they'll do it as an avatar. So now if we go back to our project.
Goodbye.
Refresh it. Oh, it's not running. That's because we did the count lines of code. See, it's still going. 35,000 files. That's because node modules, right? Node modules puts everything in your project, and if you don't exclude that, it's like the worst Git check-in ever. But if you want to pad your stats on GitHub, right? Check in your node modules every time. You'll be good to go.
Wow, that guy contributed a million lines of code today.
That's what I love about speaking at conferences and doing like the example programs is because especially with Angular, you can contribute thousands of lines of code a day.
Yeah, easily.
Right, just by writing sample apps.
If only we got paid by the line,
Right. So now it looks a little different, right? It's still not pulling in the material design, so let's go see what's going on there. That is because we didn't add the actual CSS. So in this style CSS, you can actually add any styles that you want. This is just a file that ships with Angular, so it's very easy to go ng material styles and import them, from the web, or you can import them like that syntax where it has that squiggly mark. That pulls it from the node modules directory, and then you'll want to set the margins so there aren't any. So now it's a little more looking like a material design, right? And everything's, a little smaller, but on a phone, this is how you would want a list to render. And there's tools within Chrome that you can actually see what it looks like on a phone, right? So now we're getting somewhere here. But the problem is, if we try it offline, oh, fail, no internet connection. So now we need to make this work offline. And so the way to do that is with service workers. So service workers actually give you the ability to have this background thread that can cache the resources and the requests to the internet. And so it's a great way to speed up your app. I've seen a lot of stories where people, were able to get their apps within that 3-second range because once you visit the site the first time, it caches everything. And if you're online, then it doesn't. So there's two ways of writing service workers. You can have them that check the internet first, and then if it's not there, it checks your cache, or you can have it check the cache first and then the internet. So I encourage you to do it even on the most basic website, because one of the most annoying things as someone that travels on planes like Josh a lot is that you had your story in your browser and you get on the plane, you go to read it, and for some reason like Safari refreshes all the time.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's not going to work on Safari, unfortunately. So buy that $200 Android phone, and then you can actually have your news, right, with your progressive web app. So how to do service workers is you just register as basic JavaScript. So we'll close this guy since it's running pretty good. And I'm going to create it in the source directory. So it's just called sw.js. You can name it whatever you want, but this is what I prefer just from the tutorials I've read. So this is the first thing that happens when you go and use IntelliJ and try to write ES6. TypeScript works fine, right? But you paste in some JavaScript and it's like messes it all up, right? These are supposed to be like arrows, and my actual live template has that. And so here's how you fix that. You go into languages and frameworks, JavaScript, and you change it to be ECMAScript 6 by default. So once you do that, you can come back here. Now it renders it correctly, right? So that was worth the price of admission, I think, if you want to do ES6 development in IntelliJ. Right? Pretty good stuff. So then you go here, and in your index page, you'll do if the navigator supports service worker, you can actually detect it, then go ahead and register it. And if it doesn't, oh well, you don't get that functionality. Right? So now we can go back to our browser. We can refresh, go back online. And what you'll see is that it couldn't find it. Right? And the reason for that is Angular is smart, or Angular CLI. Basically anything you put in the assets directory, it'll put into your final project. Anything you put in that root directory, it'll put its files in there. But if you have any additional ones, it's not going to put them in there. So if you go into this .angular CLI, you can add them in here. So that's how you do it. But unfortunately, you have to then restart things. So we have the terminal up here. Because it's a main configuration file, it doesn't pick that up.
Almost there.
Now if we try it, it works, and we can go and see the logging, right, that says the service worker was installed and it's active and it's fetching. There's also this ability in Chrome to see your service workers, and you can see them registered right here. There's an error, but it's there. But the most important thing is this update on reload. If you don't check that, what happens, and what's the most frustrating part of doing progressive web apps, is they do stick in your browser. Like, they don't go away because you've made it so it doesn't make a network connection to see. So by doing update on reload, it'll kill that service worker and restart it. So that's important to do. But our service worker still doesn't do anything, right? There's nothing really in here. It's just saying, installed, active, and fetch. So let's make that into something. And we'll do the look at the network and then cache appropriately. So this is all the code you can do for that. So it installs and it looks in the cache, and then it adds all these app files. So index.html and all the generated bundles that Angular CLI does, it'll put those, and so it has those in its local cache, and it gives you the ability to have an app that sits there. And if you've made that network request, then it'll actually have that data as well. So now we can go back here and refresh. Now the moment of truth, offline, and it actually works, right? And so it's doing all that caching of even those network requests to Giphy, and it has all that stuff locally. And if you want to look at it, you can look in this application tab, close the console there, and under cache storage or application storage, one of these two. Well, sometimes works. But you can see there it's got the service worker registered. But the last time I did this, there was cache items that show up here. I'm not sure why there isn't any now. Let's put it back online and maybe they'll show up. there. Under cache storage, you can see it's cached all those bundles, right? And then the data itself, it's cached all our other outside those bundles, outside of our apps URL. So those are all there. But it's still not installable. So to install it, there's a couple flags you have to enable in Chrome. One is Chrome enable add to shelf. And then the other one.
So does everybody have to do that for them to be able to install?
If you want the actual prompt for installation. So once you do this, then you go localhost 4200, and you should see this bar up here. The reason we don't see a bar is because there's no manifest file that describes like the metadata that it needs to install this application. So if we go back to our project and we create a manifest.json file, I think you can name it whatever you want, but it is JSON, so why not name it JSON? I've seen it named like manifest.webmanifest, but as a JSON file, I think JSON is a more appropriate name. And then this file basically has like the name and the short name, and then like theme colors, right? So the theme will actually have like a splash screen that matches whatever color you want it to be, and that just works great. So now that we have that, we can link it in our index.html. rel equals manifest, and href equals. So that's what you do, but at the same time, if you look at this file, it's pointing to assets that don't exist. So the way to create those assets is to go to this favicon generator, realfaveicongenerator.com, get your icon picture, which I've already downloaded to be an orange beer.
That looks like a...
Looks like someone with orange hair.
Someone that was in American politics recently.
All right. So you can change the backgrounds on the different icons. You see what they look like on the different screens. And then you can say, I'm going to put this in assets icons. And then you generate it. And it basically creates all those icons for you for all the different applications or devices that it might be installed on. So it's still downloading it. And it basically gives you those icons as well as all this HTML to reference them. So we can go back here and add it in the index.html. But you'll see those icons don't exist, so we need to download this guy and unzip it and select them all. And go back to our project, and under assets icons, we can put them all in there, right? So now we have that second element, which is the manifest file, or the last element. So now we can actually look at our application and be prompted for installation, right? So close. So you can see where the manifest is right here. So you'll see line 1, column 1, unexpected token. So we have a JSON parse error, which we saw earlier, but earlier it was some other reason. So hunt the bug down. What's wrong with that?
What?
It looks fine.
Wow, are you
was there like a special character in there?
It just needs a hug.
Right. Just needed a hug.
Come on.
Come on. Why? Oh, it's because it doesn't exist.
Oh,
right?
Start the CLI maybe?
Yep. So in this Angular CLI, do we already add it there?
Don't think so.
Right. So now you know JSON parse error is actually because it's loading an HTML file. That's obviously a 404, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
Front-end development's so easy. See, there's that manifest.json. Now, still not working. Oh, we got to restart it.
Yeah.
Right? It's always the little things. But you're all becoming like really good Angular developers, right? Yeah. Seeing all these issues, now you know. That first day is going to be way less frustrating. You're going to be like, I've seen that error. Saw Matt do it. And he was drinking a beer while he got it.
Yeah, he started with a beer. You know you're going to need it.
Told you it was warm. That's
Whoopsies.
all right. Whoopsie.
boy.
So now it's gonna work, right? Application manifest. Nope, still doesn't work. Well, add it to the home screen. The start URL in manifest is not valid. For the manifest? Oh, in the index.html? Manifest. No, it's going right there. Oh, it's rel.
Oh,
duh.
obviously.
Should have known that. Maybe we have to take this guy off.
What?
I have 2 of them. Okay. You guys are great to pair program with.
Mob programming.
Right. So we have that one.
Manifest.
Oh, that guy.
Goodbye.
You are the evil one.
Yeah. That would have been a long night.
Right.
Oh,
Why?
why?
It still is not working, though, right?
You have to restart. No, it shouldn't have to.
Shouldn't have to.
You have to
But look, we got 1.7 million lines of code.
Ah! Winner!
There's some Ruby in there and XSLT and all that. Well, it's not installable for some reason. This is why this feature comes in handy, where you can clear all the storage. And you're going to need this when you're doing progressive web apps. I don't know why it's not working, but something had to fail. Right? It does have that information.
You have to restart Chrome?
Oh, yeah?
Really?
Oh, right. After we change those flags, right? Thank you. Good point. Boom. Ha-ha! So there you can see.
Oh.
You can click here and add your application to your shelf, and it shows up with my other ones. When I did this earlier, for some reason, I had to add it twice. So this Lighthouse plugin allows you to generate a report of your progressive web app and see actually how you did if you followed the practices of using HTTPS, if you have that manifest file, if you have a service worker. And so this takes a little bit to run. If you have Google Tools open, developer tools, it won't actually run. It'll warn you. So when you do use it and you click on that button and nothing happens, there's actually a little tiny message there that says, hey, you have your developer tools open. You know, close them and then it'll work. So I'll show you what this looks like. While that's going, we actually already deployed this earlier. So you can do CF, which is Cloud Foundry, apps, and we can grab all the apps from here.
And the nice thing about a cloud is, of course, is you have that dynamic runtimes. You have the ability to start and stop apps. You have the ability to auto-heal if a service falls down.
So you can see with just our local one, right, we did pretty good. We got 87 out of 100, but our big issue is HTTPS, right? And it recommends best practices use HTTP2, but you don't have to. But our production one, we can run a report on, and it'll be much better. And so we do have a script in our GitHub repo. So this is at Cloud Native PWAs. And if we look at this deploy.sh, this is something that Josh wrote because he's good at scripting.
Somebody's got to.
It basically talks to Cloud Foundry and deploys all the services, including the client, pushes them, and basically sets up that URL. Instead of talking to localhost 8081, it talks to the server where we deployed it to. So you could check out this project, and if you have Cloud Foundry set up, you could actually deploy right to it and have it all running.
Pivotal Web Services is hosted, easy to get an account.
And look at that, 100 out of 100, right? Once it's in production on HTTPS.
And now it's resilient. If it fails, if you have no connectivity, it'll get cached. If you have services that fail on the server side, it'll do the right thing. It'll degrade gracefully.
Right.
And we defeat the problems.
You saw that there are some issues, but once you know the problems that you're going to run into with front-end development, it helps to have pair programmers that see your manifest is in the wrong location and stuff like that. So, it's pretty easy, and now you can drink beer from your beer catalog and solve all life's problems. So, two of the guys that I learned a lot of this information from are Josh Crowther and Maxim Salnikov, who's in the region of the Nordics. And these are links, so I'll publish my presentation online later, and you can click on these links and see their presentations as well as their workshops where I learned how to do a lot of this stuff, and they do, step by step how to do it all. So there's also JHipster, so Spring Boot, if you want to generate a microservices architecture using Spring Boot and have Angular on the front end, JHipster supports that. I work on that project, love it, wrote a book on it, and so if you want a free book, it's out there. And I also wrote a blog post that SP Boot PWAs is a blog post on Stormpass blog. about using Spring Boot and developing a PWA step by step. Shows you how to do it also. If you want to kind of see this without the microservices stuff, that's a good way to do it.
Right on.
All right.
Well, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
Fun, buddy.